Hello and welcome back to When Hope Endures with Mabel and Wes. We decided to add in another episode talking about some of the lingering effects and some of the things we may have missed in the previous episodes prior to the final episode where I'll talk about my side of everything. One of the things that we had mentioned in the previous, but we wanted to talk a little bit more about was your vision.
Mm-hmm.
When you got home, and even when you were at the hospital, but more when you got home, you would often scare yourself with your own hand.
Yeah, it looked like a VR. Like I couldn't see past, like if I'm looking and I grab my hand or look at my hand, it was just from my wrist up. Nothing on the, like there was nothing.
You couldn't see the arm connecting to your
Yeah.
body because that was in the part of your, so it was more your right hand because that's where your vision cut was.
Yeah.
You couldn't see the part connected to your body.
Yeah, and so many times, and still every now and then I scare myself. Like, oh, what is this? And it's like, oh my gosh, there's my hand. But also the when I what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, when I was driving, it's so weird, but my vision would widen. Like I could see.
Mm-hmm.
If I drive, I see not the whole road, but like most of the road. But if I stop driving, then it goes back smaller. Like right now I can drive and look at on my right side. Like I keep checking that all the time, making sure that there's nobody by me because the person right by me I can't see. But if it's a little bit forward, I can see him. Then
because it's that lower quadrant that you
on my
still
right
don't
side.
have.
Yeah.
It's not the full quarter. You have a little more than you can, the part that you can't see is less than a quarter, but right there is right within that blind spot. But
yeah, funny story. Probably last week at my work, there's this client. He was showing me a video, and he was looking at me, and he was like looking down and up and then and up, and I'm like, like what do you need? Like what's wrong? And then I looked down, and he had a video, like playing, and I'm like, oh wait. There's a video right there. I am so sorry I couldn't see the video because you're right on my right quadrant. Like, doesn't exist at all. Which is the interesting part because it's like those pictures. I don't know if I've said this before, but like those pictures that you see and pay attention and the circle is not connected, but your brain connects the circle. So it's the same thing. That part does not exist. And I always wondered, but now I wonder too much because now I know. But when I was younger, I met a person that didn't have an eye. And I'm like, but do you see black? What do you see? And it's like, I see nothing. Like, not even black. There's nothing. I'm like, but how is nothing? Like, you can still imagine a nothing being something. Right. But it really is nothing. Like, that doesn't exist until I look down. That's when my my vision comes back. And like, oh wait, there is something there. And then I kind of see little by little, but then it disappears again.
Mm-hmm.
Pictures. So many times I'm looking at a picture and I'm like, oh, this is so cool. And I just see half of the picture. It's like, oh, wait, there's 3 more people over here that I had no idea were in there.
Mm-hmm.
Because it closes that gap and it's just like this, like, if there's like 6 people, the first 3 are on my vision and the other 3 are like off. So they don't exist in my picture.
Right, but your mind fills in kind of the gaps and makes it look like the picture completely ended.
Yes. And that's what was happening at the beginning too. That's why I had to like
like trace with your finger.
Trace with my finger to see where the picture ended or the letters ended. That's what happens still when I read. I need to trace to see where it's gonna end, because sometimes I miss half of the page and I go down and then I don't understand what's happening.
Right, it doesn't make sense reading half a sentence and then going to the next paragraph.
Yeah, and so I'm like, oh wait, there was some words over here that, but
And same with movies too, right? When you get to watch a movie twice, you get to see one half the first time, and then you get to see the full rest of the movie the next time, because you realize that the first half of the movie you were only looking at half of it.
Yeah, and it's hard because I don't remember how it was. So I'm like, could I see the whole TV before? Like, I have no idea. And then I ask Wesley or my kids, like, can you guys see the whole thing? And sometimes they say no, or sometimes they're like, yes. Like, and that happens at work too with the exercises. I don't know if I talked about this too, but like when there's a whole spreadsheet or whatever, and I just see half of it, I'm like, oh yeah, here's the exercise you gotta do. And then halfway through the exercises, I look on the other side and I'm like, oh wait, they just changed their exercises and I didn't see. And these people are still with me. I'm like, oh, sorry, this is the exercise that you had to do, not this one. You already completed this. And that is a little frustrating, but
so scanning's still a thing. You've gotten used to doing it in some things, but you'll
but then if
forget at other times.
Yeah, if it's new things, I forget to scan.
But that's the interesting thing about driving, like you mentioned, is you've told me multiple times that when you sit down and you start driving, that the range of your vision
opens up a ton.
Opens up, and that area that you can't see is much smaller than it is regularly.
Yeah.
Which is why when you're walking, you'll bump into things, but driving, you're not hitting things because you have a wider range of vision.
Yes.
Because your brain knows that it needs that because of how important it is.
Yes. And that's so interesting, because when we go through cones, right? Like, we go through the, what is it called?
Construction site.
Construction site. And Wesley's so worried.
I'm like holding on to the handlebar there in the car, thinking, oh my gosh, is she going to be able to see the cones? But you're fine.
But I'm fine, because the quadrant that I have, it's just kind of like not in the middle, but closer to the middle in that quadrant. But I can see in the side a little bit farther. So that's why it closes. So if I see a car by me, like on my, what is it called?
Peripheral?
My peripheral. I feel like it's super close to me, but then I look and no, it's a little ways away. But because it's the peripheral that closes that gap, and so it makes everything look closer. So when I'm driving through the cones, that's a good thing that they're orange and bright orange.
Mm-hmm.
And so my peripheral sees the orange. And when I was taking the class, they're like, as long as you see and go straight, nothing is gonna happen unless, of course,
A car cuts you off.
crazy cars that, cut me off. Which, when they do that, because that has happened, it scares me. My body reacts. Like, my brain reacts and it's like, okay,
even though your vision
look.
doesn't see it, your brain sees it and automatically gets you reacting.
Yeah, which is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. I think we all have, well, the nice part is that you didn't have a full peripheral cut. You still have peripheral vision. I think we all have to some extent where the peripheral, our perception of depth on the peripheral is altered, but you have it more extreme because it's compensating for a section that's not there too.
Yes.
And so we've gotten used to it, but you still, it's just magnified for you. And so still an adaptation process there.
Yeah. Yep. And another thing, like, now that I had to do is every, how long? 2 years?
Every 2 years.
I had to take a vision test.
Mm-hmm. For your driver's license.
Yeah. My vision, they're impressed that it's really good. But they have, due to the neurological sense, I have to have a test.
Yeah, I mean, you still have almost basically 20/20 vision in your eyes, but because that vision cut, they need to check each year. Okay, have you had any accidents that have been caused because of that? Make sure it's not getting worse. And so every couple of years. This last one was a bit of a headache because we didn't get the notification until after the time frame.
Yeah.
And they said, you need to cease driving right now until we get information. You were driving back from Flaming Gorge the whole way. And this letter was waiting for us at home that basically said, cease driving until we get the results of the test back.
Mm-hmm.
And then when your doctor wrote the results and recommended that you were fine to drive, they still then denied your license and said, your license has been revoked. Until they had to work out a few things and show them that there was some misinterpretation of the data submitted by your neuro-ophthalmologist.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a headache. Hopefully that's not how it is every 2 years.
I know. Because I was like, how in the world am I not going to be able to drive anymore? There's people that see less, that they actually don't see due to the eyes and not through the brain.
And you have the peripheral, you just have that one quadrant that's...
Yeah.
And when you're driving, that lower quadrant's mostly there on the right side dashboard and everything else.
Yeah. Like, I can't see what my speed limit is or whatever. At the beginning I was under the speed limit because I was afraid to go over the speed limit. And it would take a little while to look down because once I looked down, then I would be, like, lost. So I couldn't look down to see what my speed limit was or how many times I was running almost out of gas.
Without noticing. Right, yeah. So you lose visibility of those parts. But most of the part with the windshield up is within your upper quadrant anyway.
Yep.
So, so it's kind of interesting that they would deny it, but...
That's what happened. But yeah, now I can drive again.
For another 2 years.
For another 2
years. Well,
years.
about a year now.
That's true.
Another thing that you never had prior to the stroke was headaches, or specifically migraine headaches.
Or headaches in general.
And we learned a little more about migraine headaches because they didn't necessarily start as headaches. You started to get migraine auras before... and you didn't know what it was until speaking with a neurologist. and found out that it was just a silent migraine.
Mm-hmm. Those are really bad. I wish I didn't have them.
So
I
explain
still
what
do.
happens during the migraine aura. It's usually when there's a pressure change or
Mm-hmm.
cloudy skies or a certain time of month,
Yeah.
that those all have effects on your migraine. It's not always a headache, but explain what happens with a silent migraine, at
Um,
least for you.
well, I get very confused and dizzy, and like I can still have balance, but I can't think. Or I feel like I'm going to go to the side even though I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, how many times did you tell me, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm going to fall over when you're
Yeah,
walking straight and you feel like you're walking crooked?
yeah. And those are really, really, really hard for me. One time, confession here, I did crash into a sign, remember?
But
Because it was a migraine, I had a migraine aura, and then they didn't even specify that they that the road was gonna be closed, or that there was a sign right in there that said the road was closed.
there was some bad placement of that sign.
Yes.
And I think they had just put it without putting any of the other indicators.
Yeah, that's what I'm
in
saying.
place.
Like if I was turning left and they didn't put like the cones or whatever, like, hey, you can't turn left, and I still went left, and then I hit it, and I'm like, what just happened? And it was that one of those days I had migraine auras, and so I try not to drive when that happens.
And you'll usually tell me, hey,
Yeah.
I can't drive today. And
Yeah.
being cognizant of that, I think, is shows a lot of responsibility on your part.
Yeah. Yeah, because they, like, I feel like I'm gonna pass out. I feel like I get slower. And
sometimes even noticeable within your speech.
Yeah, the worst I've had was we were outside. We have a bed outside. And we were laying on the bed. And all of a sudden, this storm came out of nowhere. And I was almost debilitated. Like, I couldn't even.
Before the storm even came,
yeah.
You said, there's a storm coming, I need to get inside, because you could feel that change of pressure.
That was the worst of the worst. That was so bad. And I've felt this like twice, but they've been like really bad storms. I used to love windy days. Windy days for me are a nightmare now. I'm trying to breathe because I remember I loved them, so I had to think through and make it so it doesn't affect me as much. But if it's a windy day, the wind can't touch my ears or my head, or else it's really bad. And
yeah, we'll talk about the cold here in a little bit too.
The cold. The cold, I used to be able to, like, we used to go dancing in December.
Outside.
And, in the amphitheater in Ogden. And it was cold and I didn't like it, but it didn't affect me. Now I can't do that at all. I feel like my skull is gonna break.
If you don't have your head covered or your ears covered in the cold,
I get super bad migraine auras. Because this is the thing, my headaches are every now and then, but the auras are very, very common. And I can't think at those times.
So you mentioned breathing through some of that. I know it doesn't take away completely, but by controlling your breathing, does it help a little bit to get through?
Yeah, and mostly also distracting myself. Not looking outside and just distracting, doing other things that will help me know that I'll be okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to eat something. If I don't eat anything, that's really bad. Or if I don't drink water, which they told me I had to drink water or eat.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so bad at drinking water still. So bad.
And that's the other side of things. So there's when you start getting that way, it's okay, which one is it? Is it because the weather outside or is it because you haven't eaten or drinking?
Or
And
both.
during the time that you're feeling that way, you're thinking, oh, it doesn't matter if I eat, it's not going to help me.
Yeah.
Or for the migraines,
It's
the
like,
thing that
I'm not
helps you the
gonna take
most.
my medicine because it's not gonna help me. And I went into this cloud in my head. I was like, no, whatever you do is not gonna help. Why bother? Don't do it.
So they gave you meclizine for those times to help with the dizziness and disorientation. But when you're in it, yeah, you don't want to take it. You're like, that's not going to help. Why would I take the medicine? But what happened shortly after taking your medicine or after eating?
15 minutes later, every time. And I remember when I get better, I'm like, oh yeah, this happens every time. And but in the moment, it feels like it's gonna be like that forever. That it's not gonna get any better. I can't do anything about it. But yes, I can. And every time I eat or drink or whatever, it disappears, and I can think again.
Yeah, those symptoms are very similar between the two, where it's a storm or eating, and happens a lot. Not so much anymore because you try to have a good enough breakfast before going to work, but it would often happen at work. You'd be coming home from work just completely worn out and drained and didn't know what was going on. But it was more that you needed to eat and needed those nutrients in your body because you would come home thinking that you couldn't anymore. But the moment you ate something, you were good to go within 15 minutes of eating.
Yeah. And it's sugar or whatever, like it has to, which sugar used to affect me a lot. Remember, like at some certain times of the month.
Well, it still does at certain times.
But not as bad as it used to.
Mm-hmm.
It would make me cloudy. And also, when I was after the stroke, it felt like I was in a dream forever and ever.
Yeah. I remember you asking, you talked to both your doctor and your neurologist about that. Is it normal that I feel like I'm in a dream? And because like you would explain it as a dream sequence in a movie where it has that little bit of haze around it and you can tell that it's either a flashback or a dream.
Yeah.
And you said that's kind of how you were living for a while. And I remember there were a couple times where you would actually get through that and you'd be like, oh my gosh, I don't feel like I'm in a dream today.
Well, I think it's when I started taking antidepressants. I don't know why, but when I started taking the medicine, my cloud just disappeared. And I was getting so sad because I'm like, is this ever gonna end? Because I don't like this. I want to live normal. I want to experience again and not live in a white cloud around me. And I started taking the medicine, and I had really hard time with the medicine at the beginning. It was no joke. Like, I would see, I don't know if I said this before in
we talked a little bit about it, but
episode about the thoughts, right? That I would be grabbing the thoughts in my head while sleeping, putting them all into sequence, whatever.
Yeah, but it was your way of starting to organize everything that was going crazy in your head. And the interesting thing was, after your stroke, your neurologist had offered anti-anxiety, anti-depression medicine.
But I didn't want it.
You didn't want it. And that's understandable. But we didn't know that they often use the SSRIs in stroke patients, not just for depression or anxiety, but to help. I know we mentioned this a little bit before already, but for the recovery of it. And so that probably how it played a bit of a role at this point.
Recovery. Yeah.
Not just with helping that, but it kind of helped with some of the finalization of everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Another thing, I don't know if we've talked about. We've talked about when they did the MRI about the
dissection.
Uh-huh.
A little bit. I don't think we went in too much detail about it.
Yeah. So they caught it, and they said that if it was still happening, that it could have caused a stroke more severe.
That's why after you got home, they still had you on aspirin for a little while, even though you didn't have an issue with clotting because it wasn't an ischemic stroke, it was a hemorrhagic. They still had you on aspirin to help try to solve the issue with that dissection so blood wouldn't pool and create a clot.
We also forgot to tell about my experience with the angiogram.
Oh, yeah.
I had an angiogram afterwards, like after I came back from the hospital.
Right, they wanted to check to see if the RCVS had cleared up and to check on that dissection.
And that dissection to see if it was still there. And they said God or the aspirin or both together fixed it.
Uh-huh.
So I no longer had a dissection in there, and it was in my neck, right?
Uh-huh. In the where your neck connects to your...
But it was on the front of my neck or something like that. Or it was in the back.
I thought it was on the back, but it could have been anywhere within there.
Yeah. But so at the first angiogram, I was at the hospital, and so I don't remember anything.
Right? You were still completely out of it. It was right after the stroke.
Yeah.
You didn't know a lot of what was going on during that time.
Yeah. No. But my second angiogram, which is so funny because every time I go to the hospital, as soon as they put that IV on me, I feel debilitated. I don't know why. Like, I can't do anything anymore. So we went to the hospital to do the angiogram. And the same, like, as soon as they put that IV on me, I was like, I can't move. I can't do anything anymore, even though I was okay.
Prior to the IV, you're running around screaming and not wanting it, but then afterwards, you're
running around. No.
But they told you were gonna be
asleep.
Asleep,
not asleep, but
that you wouldn't remember anything.
Yeah, like I was gonna be like drowsy, and that I wasn't gonna remember anything. That it's gonna be fine. Well, I remember everything. I remember when they put the needle, like the anesthesia.
Anesthesia.
I don't know.
Right pronunciation.
Anastasia,
not
kidding.
Anastasia.
They put it through my leg, right leg. I don't know if we talked about that, but with the other one.
Right.
My right leg. It's so weird that it went all the way to my brain. And I felt it. Not like feeling it like, oh, it hurts, no. But you can feel it. And
sometimes they do it in the wrist, and they were considering that, but that's usually when they go to the heart. For some reason, going to the brain, they preferred to go through your leg.
And if we can, because some people can't.
Right. Yeah.
So I remember that they told me, don't move, because I was wide awake. But without the they put that medicine, whatever that makes you, no, scared or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And they put it through. I felt it in my brain, and they would shoot this hot stuff. It would feel like my side of the brain was burning.
Was that the contrast that they were putting in there?
And it was burning. And then they're like, okay, now the other side. And it burned again. Like, it was so crazy. And I was looking at it with my eyes, like, because I couldn't move, but they had this big, huge TV in there. And so I was like, oh, if I'm awake, I want to see what's happening.
You watching the camera go through your body and everything?
Yeah. Which is just like, it was just black and white. It was just like a little black thing, and checking the vessels.
Mm-hmm. Didn't you want to like ask a question or something? What was up there?
I probably asked them stuff.
I think that's what you told me.
Yeah, I don't remember, but then, yeah, I was talking to them, and they were talking to me and saying everything, and but then the worst part of it all was the afterwards.
Right.
Even with that, the hot and cold and everything, I was okay. But then you have to be laying down for like, what, 5 hours? 4 hours? I don't know how long.
Yeah, a long time afterwards. And
I hated it because I get really dizzy when I'm laying down. And I had to be face up. Nothing else. And not even reclined. Inclined.
So that's the part I never understood was it was, so that you don't put pressure on it. We can't incline you at all. You have to be laid flat. And you would get really nauseous when laid flat.
So I was throwing up.
You were throwing up, which to me would put more pressure there than
it was a lot
being
of pressure.
inclined.
Yes. And I'm like, okay, you should have just put my head up a little bit, and that's not gonna happen.
Right.
But then, yeah, it was the worst of the worst. I was throwing up, but I couldn't get up and throw up, so I was on my side. TMI, but I was on my side, like, throwing up. And I felt it. I felt the pressure of my whole body because I couldn't get up. And the most awkward parts was like, doctors, oh, is the wound closed? I'm like,
right,
okay,
no,
I don't want to.
No discretion at all. They just rip up the sheets to see if it's closed and then put it back down. And I mean, there's no hiding anything there.
Like, okay. I didn't even have like underwear or anything. It was so weird. But anyway, that was the hardest part of those angiograms that I don't want anymore.
And you would get sick for like the week afterwards. Partly from the laying down, also from all the contrast and everything else.
Yeah.
Like the week after the angiogram, you were not feeling good at all. Luckily, you don't have to go in and do those anymore.
Hopefully not. That was, yeah.
And then they...
Quite the experience, though.
Yeah, not many people get to see inside their own brain.
And
then you had a couple MRIs since then. The MRIs you had while at the hospital and then shortly after, you didn't really get fully anxious or whatever in there like you.
Well, because they gave me medicine.
Oh, they gave you... Because I remember them giving you medicine at the final one to help you with it. But I remember there was one that you got... I don't know if it's the music you chose, which we talked about a little bit, or what, but it was causing some, a bit of anxiety while you were in there. And then the last one they did, they gave you the medicine again, and you said it was nice and relaxing.
Yeah, I mean, I had to breathe anyway, because if you think about it, it's like, I mean, you think about it and it gives you the anxiety.
Right? I have fear of being trapped in a. I'm not very claustrophobic, but I have a fear of being trapped in a small place in a cave or being stuck. And so, with my size, being in an MRI machine, it's super closed for me. And I'm trying to think, okay, if something were to happen, how can I escape? And it's, to me, gives me the same feeling as if I was stuck in a cave, like trying to spelunk.
Didn't we see that it's kind of being in a portal anyway?
With all the magnetic. And so I get that way. And so with you as well, you're a little more claustrophobic than even I am.
Yeah, that's why I need my medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But other than the vision and the migraine, what are some of the lingering effects of the stroke? Things that you still notice regularly, or I mean, you could never compare yourself to, oh, this is how it was beforehand, right? Because you've just kind of accepted this as your new life. This is how it is, the new normal. But what are some things you see that may still be a little bit of a challenge? I'm not going to say, oh, are hard or whatever, but that may be a little more challenging for you.
Well, like I've mentioned before, I think that still the numbers, like I can do math, but it will take me forever. And then after I do it, then I question my numbers. Uh-huh. Like if it's 35 and then I put 26, right? Like sometimes that would happen. I'm like, no, it's 35. Or I forget after I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this list or whatever, and then I forget the list or whatever. No, yeah, like what was in the list. Also, I'm quite slower. That frustrates me, but then I came to accept it. I feel like I'm like 3 years older and brain wise.
That you're aging a little faster.
Mm-hmm.
So with the numbers, do you think part of that is you still don't have the confidence in your own, what's the word? Autopilot then? Because if you're writing down your phone number without thinking about it, you write it down just fine.
Yeah, but
the moment you start questioning your autopilot is when you start to transpose numbers or, oh, is this really the number it's supposed to be?
Yeah, that's what it is.
So it's kind of a learning to retrust your autopilot in that sense.
Yeah, that's why I'm like afraid of like writing things too. Mm-hmm. Like I've said before, like
being a receptionist would be hard because you'd be afraid to write down the wrong date or the wrong phone
number. Or, and then I'm thinking, oh yeah, I'm saying Monday, or for example, last week too, right? Like I was saying, oh, it is on your appointment will be on Monday when it was on Wednesday. You know,
yeah.
Like. And I told my coworker, I'm like, I'm sorry. That's why I don't like scheduling anybody. But I mean, they're very patient with me, and like that's why I think it's not just me, but I'm just, like I said, I feel I'm going to the older brain wise, because it will happen eventually. Mm-hmm. But
and I think it happens more when you're nervous or under pressure too, because when you first got home, that was very common. You would say, oh yeah, last year, meaning like last week. Or you would mix up all the times and you would really get confused. Oh yeah, you would mix up the days, Monday for Friday or stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen as much anymore unless you're under pressure.
Yeah. Or I always tell my kids, hey, put this in the garbage. And that's the fridge.
Right. Or the washer. Everything's the garbage, right?
Yeah. I don't know why and it is always garbage for me, like, even though it's not the garbage.
And I think that's, like, you've gotten a lot better at, but that's the lingering aphasia still there a little bit, some disconnect. I think it's interesting that we were talking about the questioning the autopilot. I think all of us to some extent have done an exercise that's probably similar to what you do on a regular basis. But there's been times I've written a word and then I go back and look at that word and I'm like, is that really the spelling of the word? Like, my autopilot knows that's the spelling, but when I try to make sense of it, I'm like, no, that doesn't look like the word. That can't be the word. And I have to go through Google and make sure that the word is really spelled that way. And I'm like, oh, it is. But my mind, when I start questioning it, doesn't recognize that as the correct spelling of the word.
Yeah.
And so I assume it's similar to that, which I'm pretty sure we've all experienced at some time, but just to a larger scale.
Yeah. Yeah, that happens. And I just like reading, or like I don't know if I talked about the music.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I read music, like we were talking about, I just miss half of it, or the music goes super fast, even though it goes super slow. But to me, it goes really fast when I'm trying to follow the lyrics or whatever.
Like reading a hymn book or reading the music, you're a few words behind.
Yeah. Or I say the wrong words. I'm like, oh, wait, where are we now? Like, when I used to be better at that. But, and then at work too, like, sometimes I get discouraged because, I mean, my coworkers are young girls and they have everything, what is it called? Like, everything,
they have everything set. They have their system down.
Yeah. And
but they have the young, sharp minds and everything. Just because you may look like you're their age, you're a bit older than they are.
Yeah. And so when I'm like, oh, I wish I could be as fast as they are, because I'm just putting pads or whatever to clients when these girls already put laundry in it and did a whole bunch of things. But then I'm like, well, it's them and I am me, and they still like me for my work. So I have things to bring to the work too. Right.
They may have those very sharp minds and very organized and have their system, but they may not have had the same life experiences that lead to the compassion and everything else that you can offer in a different way.
Yeah.
Not saying that they don't have compassion.
No, they're really good.
Different understanding of different circumstances, right?
Yeah.
That's what I mean by
because then
that compassion.
With older people, I'm old, so I
not that old.
Well, no, but like I'm older,
right?
And
apologies.
I've had different experiences, and everybody can bring something right to the table, like. That's why it's a good team right now.
Right. If everybody was the exact same in a team, it'd be pointless to have a team made up of everybody with the exact same skill. You want a team with different skills.
Yeah.
So let's change the tone a little bit and let's talk about what are some of the things that gave you hope, encouragement, strength through these times that's led you to not just to recover, but to continue to thrive. What are some of the areas that that helped you through that?
I don't know. I think it's just my family. Being able to see my kids. And like all the support that I've gotten from everybody.
I mean, your kids were very understanding about everything
even
too.
even a month-old baby, she would not cry if I told her to stop crying or to like, okay, just settle down or whatever, that I would try to, and she would stop.
Mm-hmm.
Or she like, she has this spirit of like, even then, like 3 years later, she's so compassionate, and she knows when people doesn't feel good or when I don't feel good. She doesn't bug me. Like, she goes on her own things, and then she comes back and gives me a hug or whatever.
Right.
And she's so understanding. As a 2-month-old, 3-month-old, she was so understanding of what I was going through. And also, like, that made me feel good. I did struggle a little, but like, knowing that she was my baby, and that how can I deserve this, but yeah, my kids are, and you, like, are my biggest supporters, and I just want to see what's next. Because sometimes I think, well, I already did all this. What's the point? But like, when I get into those mindset, it's like, what's the point? But then it's like, the point is, you're gonna be a grandma someday, so you better be okay. So I want to see grandkids, and I want to see, like, keep progressing, and know that I can keep going, just physically and mind, and like, I can still do it and enjoy the time that I have while it lasts.
Miss, would you say it kind of helps knowing that where you were and where you are now, seeing the little progressions throughout help you to continue to progress as well, right?
Yeah. And doing this podcast has helped me a lot to see how much I have grown still, and I keep growing. So,
hey, I've done this. I've overcome these things. This next thing I know, I could overcome because of that.
Yeah. And I was always afraid of dying, like, before the stroke. And I'm still afraid, but know that, like, that it will be okay whenever it happens, right? Like,
you can see a bigger picture in that sense.
Yeah, and that I still want to be here to see, like I said, my family grow. But I need to just calm down and not be afraid, because at those times I was in peace, even though I had no idea what's going on. And yes, afraid, but at the same time, like, I don't know what's happening. I'll just let it happen. Whatever happens.
Kind of like, I'll leave it in God's hands.
Yeah.
And gotta rely on Him to know what's best for you in those situations. I think we have time for one more question that I had. So how did it feel knowing that hundreds of people, and many that didn't even know you, were praying for you and for your recovery?
Well, it felt really good. It felt peaceful. I think that's what gave me the strength of keep going. The strength of like I saying, like whatever the will of God, it
Mm-hmm.
will happen. And knowing that I can have a new life, that it's been 3 years, but I have to keep learning from it, like, all over again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Learn how to enjoy it, because sometimes it's hard, but lately I've been trying to enjoy again
Mm-hmm.
life, and
To
know
live
that,
life instead of just being alive.
yeah, and know that people care about me,
Mm-hmm.
and that I would like to care about people too.
I think it's, I mean, you mentioned that's kind of why you got back into physical therapy, was you kind of want to give back in some areas where so many people helped you. Um, and don't get me wrong, whether it's, hundreds of people or 5 people praying for you, it's the same.
Yes.
God cares about you the same, and he cares about the prayers of them. So I'm not uh in any way saying that it's more important to have hundreds,
Yeah,
but
no.
knowing that you have people in your corner, and people, uh they were, even people that didn't know you, they were looking out for you, wanted the best for you.
Yeah.
um
Even old friends and stuff.
mhm,
Like, they reached out to me again and told me how grateful they were for me being here, and for them being my friend and stuff.
right. I know we're definitely grateful that you're still still here. um and thank you. Uh, we're about out of time for this episode. Next episode, I will talk about my side of things, me and the kids, kind of what everything was like from our perspective. And then we have some other interviews, some exciting other interviews coming up with some other individuals who have um, undergone times of undergone times of trial, and we'll give them an opportunity to share their story. And we're really
I'm
excited about
very
that.
excited. Yeah.
Thank you all for joining us today, and hopefully you'll tune in with us next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.